James Morrison was very surprised. He had just come home from a trip, and when he opened his bedroom door, he saw something he didn't expect. His helper, Martha Davies, was sleeping in his comfy bed. But she wasn't alone. His 3 boys, David, Desmond, and Daniel, who hadn't slept well in a long, long time, were snuggled up soundly around her. Martha slowly opened her eyes. She wasn't scared or worried. "Mr. Morrison," she said softly, "I can tell you why." But James was too upset to listen. His face turned bright red. "You're fired!" he yelled. "Get out of my house right now!" Martha didn't argue. She carefully slipped out of bed so she wouldn't wake the boys. She gently smoothed David's blonde hair, pulled the blanket up around Desmond, and whispered a secret to Daniel that James couldn't hear. Then, with her head held high and her shoes in her hand, she walked past James and out of the room. Downstairs, another helper, Mrs. Chen, looked surprised when she saw Martha. Martha looked calm, but a little sad. "It's okay, Mrs. Chen," Martha said quietly. "Goodbye." The door closed, the gate creaked, and Martha walked out into the cool night all by herself. Upstairs, James was still breathing fast. The boys were still sleeping soundly. He walked closer and looked at their peaceful faces in the dim light. Desmond's mouth was soft, David was breathing steadily, and Daniel's little fists were open. They were really, truly asleep. James had hired 23 helpers, doctors, and sleep experts, but this quiet woman who cleaned his floors had done what no one else could. On his nightstand he saw a folded paper. He opened it. It said, "They asked me not to leave them alone in the dark. Sometimes that's all a child needs, someone who doesn't leave." James sank onto the bed, the note shaking in his hands. A cold, shameful feeling washed over him. He had seen a black woman in his bed with his white children, and his mind had jumped to the wrong conclusion, just like some grown-ups are sometimes taught to do. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait to hear the truth. He just fired her. And now she was gone. James couldn't sleep at all. He sat in his office until the sun started to peek through the sky. The note was on his desk next to a glass of juice he hadn't touched. Outside, the morning light touched the rooftops. Inside, the big house felt empty. Not the sad empty he felt since his wife, Catherine, passed away. This was different, like something good had been there, and now it was gone. He kept thinking about Martha's face. She hadn't looked angry, just tired, like she knew this would happen, like people had been unfair to her before. And the boys, oh, the boys. They were sleeping like they used to when Catherine was alive, peaceful and safe. And James had messed it all up in just 5 seconds. At 6:30 in the morning, the screaming started. James jumped up, his heart thumping. Daniel was kicking and thrashing in his bed, his eyes wide with fear. David was sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, holding his hands over his ears. Desmond stood by the window, silent tears rolling down his face. "Where's Martha?" Daniel cried, his voice shaky. "Where is she?" "I want Martha!" David wailed. James knelt down to hug them. "Boys, it's okay. I'm here." But Daniel pushed him away hard. "You made her leave!" His face was full of anger and sadness. "You always make them leave!" James felt like he'd been punched. He tried again. "Daniel, listen." "No!" the boy sobbed. "She didn't do anything wrong. She helped us. And you yelled at her." David hid his face in his knees, rocking faster. Desmond just stared at James with his 6-year-old eyes, seeing right through him. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. She saw the mess and her face got serious. "Boys," she said firmly. "Down. Breakfast now." They listened to her right away, walking past their dad without even looking at him. When their footsteps faded, Mrs. Chen turned to James. Her voice was quiet, but strong. "You fired her," she said. James tried to explain. "She was in my bed. With 3 terrified children who finally trusted someone enough to sleep." Mrs. Chen crossed her arms. Do you even know what happened last night? James just opened and closed his mouth. The nanny quit. Number 24. Mrs. Chin continued. The boys locked themselves in your room and were screaming so loud I thought someone would call the police. She paused, letting James think about that. David couldn't breathe. I was about to call 911. James's tummy felt like it dropped. Martha was upstairs cleaning. She heard them and knocked on the door. She talked to them. 20 minutes, Mr. Morrison. That's how long it took her to calm them down enough to let her in. And when they did, they begged her not to leave. I didn't know, James whispered. There's more. Mrs. Chin pulled out her phone and showed him a picture. Martha was kneeling next to David in the kitchen, putting a bandage on his knee. Another picture showed her reading to the boys in the library. She's been helping them for weeks. Quietly. She showed him another photo. Last Tuesday, David was choking on a grape. Martha saved his life. She used the Heimlich maneuver. She told me not to tell you because you had enough to worry about. James felt the room spin. Who is she? He whispered. Mrs. Chen's voice became softer. A children's nurse from Chicago. She worked at a big hospital for 5 years. She lost her own daughter, who was 4 years old, because of a bad allergic reaction, and she stopped being a nurse. She's been cleaning houses ever since. The phone slipped from James's hand. Where did she go? Mrs. Chin shook her head. I don't know, but you better find her fast. James found Martha 2 days later. She wasn't at her apartment, and Mrs. Chin didn't have that address. She wasn't at a job agency or a church. He found her at a special place for women and children who needed help, in a part of town called Dorchester. She was serving lunch to moms and their kids. He stood in the doorway, feeling very out of place in his fancy suit and shiny shoes. Martha looked up from serving soup. Her eyes got wide, then they looked a little hard. Mr. Morrison. Her voice was flat. You shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you. I'm working. Martha, please. It's Miss Davies, she said, setting down the spoon and wiping her hands on her apron. And I don't have anything to say to you. She turned and walked toward the kitchen. James followed her. Inside, 2 volunteers looked up, sensing something was wrong. I was wrong, James said quickly. About everything. The boys, they won't stop asking for you. Martha kept her back to him, washing dishes with careful, steady movements. That's not my problem anymore, she said quietly. You fired me. I crossed a line. Isn't that what you said? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She turned around, and James saw something new in her eyes, old pain. I've been the help my whole life, Mr. Morrison. I know how this works. I stay in my place. I clean your floors. And the second I care too much, the second I step outside the box you put me in, I become a threat. That's not fair. A black woman in your bed with your white children, she said softly, without anger, just truth. We both know what you thought, what you assumed. And we both know if I look like your wife, you never would have reacted that way. Her words felt like heavy stones in his chest because she was right. James's voice dropped. You're right. I saw you there and I didn't see you. I saw something I was taught to fear, and I'm sorry. Deeply sorry. Martha looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. Sorry doesn't undo it. I know. He took a deep breath. Mrs. Chin told me about David, about him choking, about everything you've been doing for them. I did my job. No. James stepped closer. You did what I should have been doing. You saw my sons as children, not problems. You stayed when it was hard. His voice cracked. You gave them something I couldn't. Martha put down the dish towel. And what's that? Hope, he said. That someone would stay. The kitchen became quiet. One of the volunteers quietly left, giving them space. The boys need you, James continued. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to come back. Not as a maid. He paused. As family. The word hung in the air. Martha looked away. You don't even know me. Then let me, James said. Please. Outside, a church bell rang far away. Martha closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked like she was praying. Martha came back 3 days later, not through the back service door, but through the big front door. James met her there with the boys. The moment they saw her, all 3 of them ran, shouting her name like a prayer. Martha! Martha! She knelt down and let them crash into her arms. Daniel wrapped his arms around her neck. David pressed his face into her shoulder. Desmond grabbed her hand and wouldn't let go. I miss you, Daniel whispered, his voice muffled against her. I miss you too, sweetheart. James watched from the doorway, his throat feeling tight. He had forgotten what their happy laughter sounded like. When the boys finally let her go, Martha stood up and looked at him. Her face was calm and serious, like a professional. We need to talk, she said privately. In his office, she sat across from him, not like a worker, but like someone important and equal. She pulled a folded paper from her bag. These are my terms. James nodded. Okay. She opened the paper and read aloud. 1. I'm not your maid. I'm here for the boys. My title is Child Care Specialist. 2. I make decisions about their health, their schedules, their therapy. 3. You go to counseling with me and the boys once a week, no excuses. James didn't stop her. 4. My salary is $75,000 a year plus health insurance. 5. She looked up, her eyes steady. If you ever raise your voice at me like that again, I'm gone. No second chances. James felt the importance of that last rule settle in his chest. Agreed, he said quietly. All of it. Martha leaned forward a little. And one more thing, you have to be present. Not just physically, emotionally. Those boys don't need someone who pays the bills and hides in his office. They need a father. James's voice sounded rough. I don't know if I remember how to be that. Then we'll figure it out together. She held out her hand. He shook it. Over the next few weeks, the house felt different. Martha woke the boys up gently each morning. Breakfast became a time they spent together, no phones, no emails, just talking. She taught them how to name their feelings, scared, sad, angry. It's okay to feel those things, she'd say. James started coming home earlier. He sat with them at dinner and read to them before bed, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. One night David showed Martha a drawing. It had 4 stick figures holding hands, and underneath, in wobbly letters it said, Our family. Martha's eyes filled with tears. That's beautiful, baby. Desmond looked up from his coloring book. Are you going to stay forever? Martha smoothed his hair. I'm going to stay as long as you need me. But late that night, after the boys were asleep, Martha sat alone in her room. On her nightstand was a photo of a little girl with braids and a bright smile. Her daughter, Lily. I hope I'm doing right by them, she whispered. I hope you'd be proud. Downstairs, an envelope slipped through the mail slot. No stamp, someone had delivered it by hand. James found it the next morning. His hands shook as he opened it. Emergency petition for custody. Whitmore versus Morrison. His blood ran cold. James didn't call Martha into his office right away. He sat there alone for 20 minutes, reading the paper again and again. Every word felt like a punch. It said he was a bad parent after his wife Catherine died. It said he hired 24 helpers in 6 months, showing he was unstable and couldn't take good care of his kids. And then it said, inappropriate relationship with unqualified domestic worker Martha Davies, who has a documented history of child death under her supervision. That last sentence made him feel sick to his stomach. They had twisted her sadness, turned her daughter's death into something bad to use against her. He heard footsteps in the hallway. Martha's voice was soft and kind. No, Desmond, you have to brush all your teeth, not just the front ones. A small laugh, the sound of water running. James closed his eyes. When he finally called her in, She knew right away something was wrong. What is it? He slid the paper across the desk. Martha read in silence. Her face didn't change. That calm look she used to wear when she was just the maid came back. They're going to use me against you, she said quietly. They're lying. They're taking the truth and making it sound bad. She set the papers down carefully. A black woman with no special degrees who lost her own child, a rich man who fired her for being in his bed with his sons, then mysteriously hired her back at 3 times the pay. She looked up. What do you think that looks like to a judge? I don't care how it looks. You should. Her voice became sharper. Because family court judges care, and Richard and Catherine Whitmore have money, James. Connections, power, and they're white. The word hung heavily between them. James stood up. What are you saying? Martha walked to the window, crossing her arms. I'm saying maybe I should leave. Let you fight this without me. Making it worse. No. He moved toward her. Absolutely not. James, they're not taking my boys, and you're not leaving. He stood beside her. We fight this together. Martha wanted to believe him, but she had seen this story before. The black woman gets blamed. Erased. They're going to make me seem dangerous, she said softly. Someone who took advantage, who broke the rules. Let them try. James's jaw tightened. Because I'll tell them the truth. That you saved my children. That you saved me. Martha turned to look at him, really look at him. And for the first time, she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. He was just as scared as she was. They're going to ask about Lily, she whispered. I know. They're going to make me relive it in front of strangers. James slowly, carefully, reached out and took her hand. You don't have to do this alone. Her eyes filled with tears. I've been alone for 5 years. Not anymore. That night, Martha sat on the floor of her room, Lily's photo in her hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, baby, she whispered. But those boys need me. And maybe God sent me here for a reason. Downstairs, James knelt beside his bed for the second time in months. Please don't let me lose them. Not again. The court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. James hired the best family lawyer in Boston, Robert Chin, a man who had won many difficult cases. But even Robert looked worried after reading the Whitmore's paper. They're playing dirty, he said during their first meeting. This isn't just about who gets the kids. They're trying to ruin your good name and hers. Martha sat beside James in the meeting room, her hands folded in her lap. Robert looked right at her. Miss Davies, they're going to ask about your daughter, about the day she died, about why you stopped being a nurse. Are you ready for that? Martha's voice was steady. No, but I'll do it anyway. James watched her. The strength it took for her to sit there, knowing what was coming, made him respect her deeply. That night, after the boys were asleep, James found Martha on the back porch. She was staring out at the city lights, hugging herself. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Martha spoke. Her name was Lily. She was 4. Her voice was soft and far away. We were at a park. She got stung by a bee. I didn't know she was allergic. By the time the ambulance came. She stopped, swallowed hard. I'm a nurse. I should have known. I should have saved her. It wasn't your fault, James said quietly. Doesn't matter. I couldn't forgive myself. She looked down at her hands. I walked away from everything. My nursing license, my job, my sister. I just disappeared. James turned to face her. And now you're here. Now I'm here, she repeated, taking care of someone else's children while mine is gone. Martha, do you know what they're going to say? She looked at him, her eyes wet. That I'm trying to replace her. That I attached myself to your family because I lost my own. That I'm broken. Dangerous. You're not broken. Yes, I am. A tear slid down her cheek. We all are. You, me, those boys upstairs. We're all just broken people trying to hold each other together. James felt something open up in his chest. Then maybe that's enough. Martha looked at him, confused. Maybe being broken is what makes us right for each other, he said. Maybe that's what family really is. Not perfect people. Just people who refuse to leave. Martha closed her eyes. More tears fell. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time since Catherine died, James didn't feel alone. Inside, Daniel stood at his bedroom window, watching them. He smiled. Then he went back to bed. 2 weeks later, they walked into the courthouse together. The Whitmores were already there. Richard Whitmore looked at Martha like she was dirt on his shoe. Catherine wouldn't even look at her. James took Martha's hand. We're in this together, he said. She squeezed back. Together. The courtroom was smaller than James expected, and colder. The Whitmores sat with their team of lawyers, for men in fancy suits. James had Robert, and Martha sat behind them in a simple blue dress, her hands folded. The Whitmores' main lawyer was a man named Thornton, with silver hair and sharp eyes, the kind of man who knew how to twist the truth into something ugly. He started with James, making him sound like a bad father who had failed his children, who had hired 24 helpers in 6 months, who had left them with staff while he worked all the time. Every word stung because some of it was true. Then he called Martha to speak. She walked up slowly, chin high, sat down, and placed her hands in her lap. Robert started gently. Miss Davies, can you tell the court what happened on the night of October 15th? Martha's voice was calm and clear. The boy's helper had quit. They locked themselves in Mr. Morrison's bedroom. They were having a very bad reaction to their sadness and fear. Breathing fast, feeling lost, very scared. I have 5 years of experience as a children's nurse. I knew what was happening. So I helped them. And why were you in the bed with them? Because they asked me to stay. Because the most important thing you can do for a scared child is show them you won't leave them alone in the dark. Mr. Thornton stood up to ask his questions. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. Miss Davies, you're not a licensed nurse anymore, are you? No. Because your daughter died when you were taking care of her, correct? The courtroom became very quiet. Martha's hands tightened a little. My license wasn't taken away. I chose to give it up. Your 4-year-old daughter died from a bee sting when you were watching her. Thornton's voice was sharp. Is that correct? Robert quickly stood up. Objection! This is meant to upset her. But Martha spoke over him. Her voice didn't shake. Yes. My daughter died. It was officially called an accident by the doctors and police. It was a terrible sadness, not carelessness. She looked right at Thornton. And yes, I feel that sadness and guilt every single day. But that guilt taught me something. It taught me that children are precious, that every moment matters, that you don't walk away when they need you. Or maybe, Thornton leaned forward, you failed to protect your own child, and now Mr. Morrison expects us to believe you can protect his. Martha's breath hitched for just a second. James saw it. The way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes looked far away, and he couldn't take it anymore. That's enough, James said, standing up. The judge looked at him sharply. Mr. Morrison, sit down! But James didn't sit. He looked at Martha, at how she was trying so hard to stay strong. She saved my sons, he said. And you're tearing her apart for it. Robert pulled him back down, whispering urgently. The judge called a break. Outside in the hallway, Martha leaned against the wall, her eyes closed, breathing carefully. James stood beside her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She didn't open her eyes. They're going to win, aren't they? No, James said. They're not. But he wasn't sure he believed it. When court started again, the judge did something surprising. She asked to see the boys, not to make them speak in court, but in her own private office. Robert, Thornton, James, and the Whitmores were allowed inside. Martha had to wait outside. Judge Harris was an older black woman with kind eyes and a serious voice. She knelt down to the boy's level. "Daniel," she said gently, "can you tell me about Martha?" Daniel looked at his father, then at his grandparents, then back at the judge. "She makes us feel safe," he said quietly. "How does she do that?" "She doesn't leave. Everyone else left, but she stays." David spoke up, his voice small. "She doesn't get mad when we cry. She says it's okay to miss Mommy." Desmond, the quietest one, said simply, "She loves us." Judge Harris wrote notes. "And what about your dad?" The boys looked at James. "He's trying," Daniel said. "Martha's teaching him." After the boys left, Judge Harris leaned back in her chair, looking at everyone. 2 days later, she announced her decision. The courtroom was full. News reporters had found out about the case. Cameras waited outside. Judge Harris spoke clearly. "This court understands that the Morrison children have been through a lot of sadness and fear. The court also understands that Mr. Morrison's first way of dealing with that sadness was not good enough." James's tummy dropped. "However," the judge continued, "the evidence shows that the children are doing much better since Miss Davies started taking care of them. The request to take the children away from Mr. Morrison is denied." Martha let out a breath. James grabbed her hand. But Judge Harris wasn't finished. "This court orders the following: mandatory family therapy, monthly visits to the home by a social worker for 6 months, and Miss Davies must complete a special training program for child care within 1 year." Outside, Richard Whitmore made a statement to the reporters. "It's a disgrace," he said, his voice bitter. "Leaving children with a house helper who has a child's death on her record. We will fight this decision." The story spread everywhere. News headlines screamed. Some newspapers called it dangerous. Others talked about the unfairness of racism. Comments on the internet were full of mean words. Martha sat in the living room that night, looking at her phone, her face blank. James found her there. "Don't read that." "Why not?" Her voice was empty. "It's all true. I'm the black maid who broke the rules. That's the story they want. It's not the truth. The truth doesn't matter anymore." James sat beside her. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he made a decision. The next morning, James Morrison stood outside his building design company. Martha stood beside him. The boys held her hands. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. James stepped up to the microphone. "6 months ago, my wife died. I fell apart. I hired people to handle what I couldn't face. My children's sadness. My own failure. I went through 23 helpers before Martha Davies walked into our lives." He paused. "And when she finally did what all those qualified professionals couldn't, when she helped my sons sleep without nightmares, I fired her." The crowd became silent. "Why?" "Because I saw a black woman in my bed with my white children, and I believed the worst." His voice cracked. "I didn't see her kindness, her skill, her good heart. I saw a threat because that's what I was taught to see." He looked at Martha. "I was wrong. Shamefully wrong. Martha didn't cross a line that night. She erased one. Because children don't care about degrees or skin color. They care about who stays when they're scared. And Martha stayed." Daniel suddenly spoke up. "Martha is family." David and Desmond nodded. The press conference ended, but the conversation had just begun. That night, messages poured in. Support from families like theirs, from caregivers of color, from people who had been wrongly judged. Martha read them, and finally she cried, not from pain, but from hope. 3 months passed. Martha started a special training program at a big school to learn how to care for children who have been through sad things. Twice a week she drove to Cambridge, studied late at night after the boys slept, and found parts of herself she thought were gone forever. One evening her teacher asked her to stay after class. "Davies," the woman said. "That's your last name?" Martha stiffened. "Yes. Martha Davies from Chicago, Lurie Children's Hospital." Martha's heart stopped. The woman's face, it was familiar. Nicole. Her sister smiled, tears already forming. Hey sis. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since Lily's funeral when Martha had pushed everyone away. Nicole walked around the desk and pulled Martha into a hug. Martha resisted at first, then started to cry. I'm sorry, Martha whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, Nicole said. I know. They talked for hours that night about Lily, about sadness, about the boys, about everything Martha had been carrying alone. Your nursing license, Nicole said finally. I've been working with the Illinois Nursing Board. With your new training and my recommendation, they'll give it back to you. You can be a nurse again. Martha shook her head. I can't. You already are. You're just calling it something else. 3 months later, Martha stood in a small ceremony at Boston Children's Hospital. Dr. Reyes, the head of the children's department, handed her a badge. It said, Martha Davies, RN, Pediatric Trauma Specialist. The boys were there, holding a sign they had made. Our Martha is a real nurse. James stood beside them, his eyes bright. That night, James asked Martha to come to his office. I have something for you. He slid a paper across the desk. Martha read the title. Her hands started shaking. Legal co-guardianship agreement. James, I want you to be their guardian officially. His voice was gentle. Not as an employee, as family. If something happens to me, they stay with you. And even if nothing happens, you have the legal right to make decisions about their lives because you already do. I just want the law to recognize it. Martha couldn't speak. Why? She finally whispered. Because you didn't just save them. James's eyes were steady. You saved me. You taught me how to be a father again. How to stay when things are hard. I trust you with everything that matters to me, Martha. She stared at the papers. And what are we? What is this? James smiled softly. Family. Maybe not the kind people expect, but family. Not. She couldn't finish the word. Romance. He shook his head gently. Maybe someday, or maybe never. What matters is we're partners in this, in them. Martha picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She sighed. That weekend they sat the boys down and explained it. So Martha's like our mom now? Daniel asked. Martha knelt. I'll never replace your mom, but I love you like you're my own. Always will. Desmond wrapped his arms around her. Good, because we love you too. David grinned. Can we call you Martha, Mom? James and Martha looked at each other. If you want, Martha said, her voice a little shaky. And just like that, everything changed. 1 year later, the Morrison house on a Saturday morning was a happy mess. Daniel practiced piano in the living room, not perfectly but with joy. David built a fort out of couch cushions. Desmond sat on the porch with Martha, reading quietly, her hand resting on his shoulder. James came home early from work, which he did often now. And the boys shouted his name. Dad. Dad. Watch this. Not father, just Dad. And it sounded like home. At dinner that night there was spilled milk, arguments about vegetables, and lots of laughter. Martha made an announcement. Boston Children's Hospital asked me to create a training program to teach nurses how to work with children who've been through sad things. They're calling it the Davies Method. The boys cheered. James reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's incredible. And, Martha continued, they want to work with your company to design places for healing. Hospitals, shelters, places where kids feel safe. James blinked. They asked for me? I recommended you. Their eyes met. Something warm passed between them. Not quite love, not yet, but something close. Something growing. The next week, Martha asked James if they could take a trip. Where? He asked. Chicago. I need to visit Lily's grave. She paused. And I want to bring the boys. James didn't hesitate. Of course. They drove together, all 5 of them. The boys were quiet in the back seat, sensing this was important. At Graceland Cemetery, Martha knelt before a small headstone. It read, Lily Marie Davies, 2018 to 2022. Forever loved. The boys stood close beside her. Lily, Martha said softly. These are Daniel, David, and Desmond. They wanted to meet you. Daniel placed a wild flower on the grave. Hi, Lily. We love your mom. She takes really good care of us. David added, She's the best at hugs. Desmond whispered, We'll take care of her too. We promise. Martha closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. James stood back, giving them space, but close enough to be there. On the drive home, Desmond fell asleep against Martha's shoulder. Daniel and David argued about superheroes. James glanced at Martha in the rearview mirror. She smiled. He smiled back. That night, after the boys were tucked in, James and Martha sat on the back porch under the stars. The Boston city lights glowed in the distance. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into that bedroom? Martha asked. James shook his head. I try not to. It's too painful. I think about it sometimes, she said. And I think maybe we were meant to find each other. All of us. Not because we were perfect, but because we were broken. Kintsugi, James said quietly. What? Japanese art. Repairing broken pottery with gold. The cracks become beautiful. Martha smiled. I like that. Inside, 3 boys slept peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow. Outside, 2 grown-ups, who had both been broken but had chosen to stay, sat in comfortable silence. And somewhere beyond the stars, maybe Lily and Catherine were smiling, too. Because getting better doesn't happen in big, sudden moments. It happens in staying, in the small choices to love when it's hard. In the quiet belief that broken things and broken people can become something beautiful, not perfect, but beautiful.